Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. Okay. Welcome back. All right. Yeah, so let me share my screen here. Can you still hear me? Bring up the chat here. And share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Let's minimize this. Yeah. Let's bring on the chat. Okay, awesome. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's just go over real quick on the syllabus and let's see what the plan is. So the plan is to keep discussing what we started last week. We had started talking about storing things in the database, right? And that we were going to, now that we have a place to store things in the database, we were going to talk about being able to represent users in the database, accounts, profiles, things that human beings might want to store that are personal to them, and relationships that they might have with other data, such as things, movies that they like, recipes that they like to take a look at, right? So all these discuss how we do make these relationships, as well as relationships between users. Users might follow each other. They might send messages to one another, right? They might be part of some team. So yeah, so we know enough to do that, to create relationships, to create users, objects, and but then we also need to be able to create an identity of that user, so that they might be able to identify themselves, perhaps register and say who they say they are, and then be able to, for them to maintain some kind of session or discussion with the server. So the server, if they're seeing data that it pertains to them, that it's somehow related to them, we need to be able to identify who they are, right? And then find all those relationships, right? And display, their preferences. At the same time that other users might be also using the same server, right? So we have to be able to maintain some kind of independent session per user, right? So that's going to be the discussion of this week. And so the recording that I made on over the weekend, that I made available, discussed a little bit of that, right? And how is it that we can create users, retrieve users, delete users, update users, but also we had just gotten started about being able to register, log in, log out, grab a profile. So we'll keep discussing that today. Then obviously we won't have it's Thanksgiving. Actually, no, we will have a last meeting on Wednesday. The undergrad folks won't have a meeting on Friday, but we will continue discussing state management, how to keep track of users, whatnot, right? And then next week we will either continue discussing some of that, keep working on a prototype that you can use. I've shared the source code with you if you want to make use of that for your own purposes, for your own prototype, for your own development for the project. So that will be next week when we come back from the break. We'll keep working on projects. If you have any particular questions that we might want to cover in class that might be useful for the whole class, if I see something that is a recurring issue amongst vigorous teams, I might share that solutions to those things for the rest of the class. Then when we come back after that, this is the week of December the 5th, right? We're going to review for the exam. And then later that week, that would be around December 9th, right? We will have the second exam. And the week after that, which is the week of December the 11th, 12th, we will have a project grading, right? So that it'll be due that Sunday. The project will be due that Sunday, and then all that week, we will be grading the projects. You don't have to be physically here. This could be over Zoom. So if you want to start, obviously, you can be anywhere you want in the world. Obviously, this is an online course, but we'll meet over Zoom. You will demo your project to myself or the TAs, right? And we'll give you a final grade there. Okay, so that's the plan. Any questions in that? All right. Yeah, so I do want to go over the requirements for the projects just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the requirements of the project is at the beginning, the resource. We went over this somewhat at the beginning of the course, and we have discussed this a bit. But let's make sure we are all on the same page with what we are expecting you to do. So the overall set of screens that are required for the course, these are it. You must have a home screen, and that home screen needs to be dynamic in that it has to display content depending on whether you're logged in or not, right? So if you're logged in, then the home screen knows who you are, right? And it might contain information that is pertaining to that person who's logged in. If instead of it's being accessed by someone who has not yet logged in, and you're anonymous, then the home screen displays an anonymous content, right? So it needs to be able to distinguish, right, on whether I know who you are or not. So if I know who you are, I might, greet you, saying, hey, welcome back, Alice. I might show, the latest movie that you've liked, the latest song review that you've made, your favorite recipe, right? So that's something that's peculiar to you. If I don't know who you are, then I might show you something generic, something that I might show anyone, right? Obviously, it needs to provide a means of logging in or registering, creating an account, but it should not. The application should not force you to log in, right? Only if you need to create any content, then you are forced to log in. But if you're just reading and browsing around, then you should not be forced to log in. So, for instance, there's a search page here that is required. That if you navigate to the search screen, anybody can search the app or whatever the data you have, whether you're logged in or not. So if I'm here, I'm searching for a favorite recipe that has a particular ingredient. I get a list of those, right? And And if I click on a particular recipe, I go to a detail screen where it shows, maybe the exact steps to cook whatever it is that the recipe says, right? And for that, I don't need to log in, right? There's no need to log in. I'm just perusing the data. Now, all this data is coming from some third-party API. So there's a requirement for you to integrate your application with some third-party API. Again, of your choice, you choose the topic. But the API has to support at least two use cases. One is be able to make some generic query out to the third-party API, and it should come back with some collection of things that meet your query. Okay, and here in the search screen, once you've searched something, it displays the search results, right? And the results might be displayed in a compact form, maybe as a grid or as a table or as a list, right? But it's a summary, right? It doesn't show all the information. If it's what would fit maybe in a row, in a table row, or what would fit maybe in a grid box, right, on a card. Okay. But if you click on any one of those elements, it navigates to a detail screen where you do show more information about that specific thing that you selected, right? It might be that you found some team, or maybe you found information about a particular game, right? Maybe it's a soccer game, right? And if you click on that particular game, right, it goes to a detailed screen where you show, who scored, what was the final, maybe some pictures and videos of the game, right? Who played, the players, right? The coach, statistics about the games and whatnot. Okay. Now here in the detail screen, you should be allowed to create content. Well, anywhere you should be allowed to create content at some point, right? Somewhere about something, and that's up to you what it is, right? But I would suggest that if you're at the detail screen, the subject of your review or your comment, or your rating, thumbs up, thumbs down, likes, or how many stars, or you leaving a comment or something. The subject matter is that thing that you're looking at, right? The recipe or the team or that particular match, okay, that book, that song, whatever it is. You're leaving a comment, a like, whatever. Now, to be able to create content, you do need to be logged in, because I need to know who's creating this content, right? So in that case, if you're creating content, then you will be forced to log in. So somehow you need to be forced to log in if you're going to create content. Leave a message, leave a like, right? Leave a subscribe or whatever. And then once you log in, then you are allowed to create content, and you leave a comment, whatever. Now, this detail, right? If you're looking at a particular movie, a particular song, half of the content is generated from accessing the third-party API, right? So it might be the idea of a movie, the idea of a song, and you retrieve, maybe the lyrics of the song, and you display them here, right? So none of this content, right? Half of it, none of that lives in your database. All right, so in your database, what you store in your database is the other content, right? Content that is generated by your users. So if Alice leaves a comment saying that she loves that song or she hates that movie or whatever, that information lives in your database, right? That Alice hates that movie. So this page, that content generated by Alice or Bob or Charlie, right, would be rendered somewhere on this screen. So this screen is really a mashup of two pieces of content. One coming from a third-party API, which you don't own you don't own that content, right? It's somebody else's content. You're just displaying it here. The other half of the content is content that you do own, right? It's stored in your database. And this would be Charlie's love for the movie, Bob's hate for the movie, and Alice's review of the movie, right? Would be listed somewhere down here, right? About that particular content. So somehow you need to maintain a representation of the thing, or of the song, of the movie. You need to keep track of some representation of that thing in your database. Right? It doesn't mean that you would copy all the contents from that remote API onto your database. Not all of it. Right? The only real thing that you need is the ID, some kind of unique identifier that allows you to identify the data from that third-party API, right? And then match it with content in your own database, right? So it could be, if it's a movie, there might be an IMDb ID, so the ID of a movie, which you can use to both, go fetch the data from the third-party API, and then also to retrieve that data that you might have stored in your database, right? And then you mash up. So there are two queries here, right? There are two queries. One query goes out to the third-party API, to the cloud, right? To OMDB, Amazon, Best Buy, Yelp, whatever those are, and you retrieve that data dynamically. And the other query goes out to your database, right? To your own RESTful API, saying, hey, do I have anything for this movie? You probably don't have anything, right? For most movies. So most of that content will be empty, but nevertheless, you need to go check with the database, right? If you have anything. If you do, it comes back to this, right? And then you would render it maybe at the bottom, right? All the likes, the hates, all the reviews that you might have, that Alice or Charlie might have written. That makes sense? So now, if Alice liked it, right, and Bob hated it, right, down at the bottom, right, it should list all we know about that movie, right? Not only the stuff that we went and fetched out from IMDb, but also at the bottom, you list, saying, Alice likes it, Bob hates it, blah blah blah, at the bottom. Now, next to those next to that information we have about the movie, right, for Bob, for Alice, you should put the ID or the username of the user who created that content, right? Who reviewed it, who hated it, who loved it. So the ID or the username of that person should be listed there, or maybe the name, right? That person who created that content. And if I click on that person, right, if I click on the URL of that person, it should take me to the profile of that person. So for instance, if I see that Alice wrote a review about Terminator, right, I should be able to say, oh, it was awesome, blah, 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 whatever. If I click on Alice's link, right, it should navigate me to her profile, right, so that I can see her profile, even if I'm not logged in, right? Even if I'm anonymous. So visiting somebody else, so you should implement being able to visit somebody else's profile. In that profile, there will be that profile should be a subset of the real profile, of the overall profile, right? So the overall profile, which is listed here, right, should contain things that would render either private information or public information, right? Maybe and not display the private information. Don't display the private information to the rest of the world, right? That might, and you get to decide what that is, right? It might be the email of the person, it might be, the address of the person, right? So that might be sensitive information that, it's known to the owner, right? The owner of that profile, but it's not. You should not publish it or make it public to the rest of the world, right? So your profile screen should be smart enough to know that I am showing you the profile that doesn't belong to you. So I'm going to hide this content. Okay. Now, if while I'm visiting somebody's profile, I should be able to see, all the stuff that is related to that person, right? So I could see, oh, I saw that Bob liked this movie, right? And so I navigate to Bob's profile, and and maybe in Bob's profile, I see not only that Bob liked Terminator, but I can also see that he hated aliens, right? And he loved Judgment Day, but that he hated the Abbotts, or he loved Titanic. So I should see a list of all the things that Bob or Alice, all the information that is associated to Bob, right? That is not private, only the public stuff. And I should see a list of things that Bob is related to, right? So anything that is related to Bob or Alice and whatnot, I should be able to see in the profile. Again, unless you deem it to be private information, right? So I should be able to see all the movies that Bob likes, all the movies he hates, all the movies that he has written a review for it, all the people that follow Bob, right? All the people that Bob follows. Maybe not the messages, maybe that's private, right? Only if I'm looking at my own profile, I can see all the messages that I've sent, all the DMs that somebody has sent me, right? But if it's somebody else visiting my profile, they can't see that, right? So there's a distinction between somebody visiting your profile and or you visiting your own profile, right? If you visit your own profile, it's the same thing as the public profile, with the distinction that I can also see private detail, right? So I can see all my DMs that I have received. I can see all the DMs that I've done, the direct messages, plus all the public stuff, right? Obviously, the movies that I like, the movies that I don't like, the people that follow me, people that don't I follow. Okay. Plus the private information, right? My email address, things that are not necessarily visible to everybody else. Okay. And so now all these all the information again that is related to me should be available here in the profile, right? Yeah, again, all the movies that I like and whatnot. Now, if I like the movie or I hated a movie, right, it should be listed here. Now, if there should be some kind of link, right, that navigates me back, right, to the details, of the maybe I hate, Terminator, or there should be a link to the Terminator movie. So if I click on the Terminator, it goes to the Terminator detail screen, right? Or if I've written a review about aliens, right, there should be some kind of link that navigates to my aliens screen, right? And then it shows me the review that I wrote. Okay. Let's see. What else? So obviously, right, we need to learn. So most everything we know how to do. Most everything we know how to do. What we don't know how to do is this last piece that we're discussing, right? On how is it that we distinguish whether we're logged in or not, right? On retrieving information that is specific to a user, and how do we handle multiple users, right? So if I have Alice, Bob, or Charlie, and they're all logged in at the same time, and each one should see their specific information, right? If Alice is logged in, then she sees all the movies that she likes, right? But if I log in as Bob, I see the movies that Bob likes, right? And not vice versa, or and then they don't mix, right? I can visit Alice's profile, I can see what she likes, right? But still, the application knows that Alice's is not my profile because I'm logged in as Bob, right? So if me logged in as Bob, I navigate to Alice's profile, right? I can see Alice's information, public information, but not private information. I can only see my private information. Okay, so that's the only piece that is left to learn here, right? How do we do that? How do we keep track of session or identity of who is currently talking to me? Because how the server can tell, right, that I can send Alice's information, Bob's information, right? That's what we're going to be learning today. What else? We know how to talk to a third-party API. We talked about, we did that with the prototype for IMDb. Okay. We know how to retrieve data from our third-party API. We know how to retrieve data from our own database, right? From our own RESTful API, right? So that we know how to do. Okay, so everything I've said is discussed in more detail in the next several sections, okay? With some formal descriptions of the requirements, okay? The profile, the home screen. If I'm visiting somebody else's profile, then the ID of the person that I'm visiting, right, should be encoded as part of the URL, right? So for instance, if I'm visiting Bob's profile, it will be the URL should be /profile/ the ID for Bob, right? But if I navigate to my own profile, notice that there is no ID embedded as part of the URL. So somebody said, well, how does it know, right, what person is logged in, right, if it's not encoded in the URL? Well, that's what we're going to learn about today, right? We're going to store information in the session that is tied to a cookie, right, and see how that, if I'm logged in this profile as Alice, then I would see Alice's profile here, or Bob's or Charlie. Okay. The other thing that here's the search results, the details, the same thing that I discussed, login, register, blah blah blah. Yep. Privacy policy is not required. Styling, the application should be responsive, meaning if I resize the screen, the application should work at all sizes, right? From desktop to tablet to a small phone, right? It should still be able to use your application. You're welcome to use any CSS library you want. Obviously, Bootstrap is great. White space, make sure that things are not overlapping weird. Things are not wrapping around weird. Make sure that you have margins and padding. White spaces between the content. That content is not flush or cramped, right? That also make sure that contrast is good. That you don't have dark content on top of a dark background that you can't read. Make sure that things are labeled, right? That if I look at a form, I understand exactly what you're asking me to write, right? But it should look, the content should look professional, right? It should look polished, right? It should look like you really thought it out and it looks beautiful, right? You should be proud to share this content, this application with a future employer, right? And you should be able to show it off and say, oh, look what I know how to build. Look how great it looks. Okay, be consistent, same color scheme throughout, same fonts, right? Same padding and white spaces, right? User experience requirements. Yeah, so yeah, it's listed there. So architectural, right, needs to be a multi-tiered application. Dynamic content, rendered dynamically on the front end. User requirements. Okay, so there's some requirements on how many types of users, not how many instances of users, but how many types of users, right? So for the undergrad, they have to come up with 2 types of users, and they have to be distinct users. Now, for the graduate, to make it a little more challenging, you need to come up with 3 types of users, right? And they need to be distinct users. And by distinct, I mean that there must be at least one thing that one user can do that the other one can't. Okay, so there has to be something distinct. There could be a button or drop down and that is available to one but not the other. Right. So, for instance, if I'm a faculty, right, I can create quizzes, right? I can change grades. I can do things that students can't. Right? So, as a student, I can take the quiz, but I can't modify the quiz, right? Now, both of us could be manipulating and interacting with the same data types, right? Both of us are interacting with the quiz, but a student has maybe read-only access, but a faculty has update, right, availability or use cases that it's not available to students. Okay, so 3 types of users. For instance, it could be a student, a faculty, and a system administrator. So those are 3 examples of distinct roles. One of them could be an actor, and the other one could be a fan, right? Somebody could be the owner of the restaurant, and the other one could be a cook. Somebody could be a buyer, and the other one could be a seller, right? Plus maybe a system administrator. So 3 types of users. Okay. Users that student users that would use your application. I guess let me make sure I put here. Oh, with that. Okay, and then just make sure this is 3 for graduate students. Okay. So here's just some examples. Anonymous user, I just said, right, that most of the applications should be available to the anonymous users. Roles about CRUDing, as I mentioned earlier, right? A faculty could have update and create and delete operations, right? But a student cannot update a quiz, even though they can view the quiz, they can take the quiz, right? But they can't modify the quiz. So you could have 2 users or 2 types of users where one user only has read-only access, so they can only read, right? They can't create, update, or delete the data. But then the other user can have the composite or the corresponding users. All right, let's see, is there a question on the chat? So anonymous cannot be one of the types. No, yes, you're correct. Thank you. Anonymous doesn't count. Anonymous means I don't know what type of user you are, right? So I'm just going to generically display content. So that anonymous is not a type of user, correct? Thank you, Brian. So grads actually need 4. Yes, and undergrads actually need 3, I guess. Okay, so okay, data model requirements. Okay. All right, so oftentimes I will use the term domain object. And by domain object, I mean, so you'll need to store stuff in the database, obviously, right? Now, some of the information that you store in the database is about human beings, right? About the actor or the student or the faculty. You need to create maybe a collection that represents each type of user, or maybe you have a collection of users, and then you have a column that shows the type of that user, right? However you want it to do. So that's a users collection. Now, obviously, you'll need to store other data that is not human, right? Maybe information about movies or recipes or ingredients or scores, right? Reviews and stuff like that, right? So all those things I refer to as domain objects, right? These are objects that you need to store in the database, right? But they are specific to the domain you choose, right? So for instance, if you choose the domain of movies, then a domain object would be a movie. Okay, now an actor is not a domain object, it's a human thing, right? So that's not a domain object. So anything that is non-human they need to store in the database is what I call a domain object. Okay, and by domain I mean the topic that you choose, right? The is an object that is peculiar about the topic of the project that you're building. Okay, so again, so if it's songs, then obviously a song would be a domain object. A playlist could be a domain object, something that is specific to your domain. Now there are things that you store in the database that is not a domain object, is not a human object either, but a relationship between the two. So for instance, if you like a movie, right, a like is not a domain object. right? A like, where you specify that Alice likes that song. Now that's not a domain object because a like is not specific to your domain, right? You can like anything. You can like songs, movies, recipes. So like is just a relationship between two things. So that's not a human thing, right? It's not a domain object. It's just a relationship between two things. So a like does not count as a domain object, right? Question in the chat. Let's see. So your movie example, what would another domain object? So you can have a playlist that collects multiple movies, right? You could have a library of movies, right, that are specific to that domain. Now, sometimes you can change the name of something, right, and then make it specific to your domain. Okay, and then you can claim that it's a domain object, which is fine. I'm okay with that, right? So if you're able to rename something that has very specificity about the domain that you choose, then I'll let it go. But if it's obviously something that is so generic, like a review is also very generic, right? You can make a review out of anything. Okay, um, so you have to come up with two domain objects, right, that are specific. Okay, other things. You have to have also at least one one-to-many relationship between domain objects. Okay, or between users, and a domain object. So at least one-to-many relationship, right? So the example that we have in our assignment is a user tweeting, creating a tweet, right? So there's a one-to-many. There's only one person can tweet multiple tweets, right? So one person has many relationships with multiple tweets, but then each tweet only has one relationship with the author. So that's a one-to-many. Now that one-to-many can be either between a user and a domain object, or between a user and another user, right? Or between a domain object and another domain object, right? So you can put it anywhere you want. You also have to have at least one many-to-many relationship, right? So for instance, one person can follow many people, but then one person can be followed by many people. So that's a one-to-one. That's a many-to-many between users, right? Or maybe an actor in a movie is also a many-to-many, right? One actor can act in many movies, but then one movie can have many actors, right? Different actors. So that's a many-to-many. So you have to have at least one many-to-many relationship between either a user and a user, or user and a domain object, or between domain objects. Okay. UML, these are just some generic UML class diagrams. It's not required that you provide a UML diagram, but here's just a couple of examples on other projects that other students have gone through. There is a requirement that you connect to a third-party API. In my example, I'm connecting to IMDb, and there's tons and tons of third-party APIs out there. One place where you can find some of these is Programmable Web. Programmable is one of many repositories of third-party APIs, right, where folks can advertise data that they make available. Most of them is free. Some of them you need to pay for it. But you can search here, whatever topic you can think of, right? You'll find something. Or even if you search it in Google, you can find an API. I would suggest finding something that is RESTful, a RESTful API. Some of them you need to apply. Like you need to say, you have to describe what it is you're building. right? And you have to leave your contact information. Most of them are just available for free, but some of them you need to apply. And so I would get going and finding something that might be palatable that you might be interested in. So yeah, I would get going on that real quick and doing a prototype. I think that's it. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. Let's see. All right. Okay. So I shared over the weekend. I shared a video that discussed how to manage users, right? How to create users, update users, delete users, and whatnot. All right. I'm just going to review that real quick, just to know where we are, and we can continue discussing session management. Right, not being able to log in, register, but that video laid the groundwork for some of that. But so I just want to review it with you. What we did was that we declared a schema that described the data for all users. One thing that might be useful to do here is put a type of user. Right, that'd be good. And the type could be this is for movies, right? For movies, so this could be so it's a string, first of all, and then you can specify the only option. So if you leave it like that, then folks can type anything they want as a type, right? But it's a good idea that if if it's something that needs to be a specific value, you can enumerate the strings, the actual value that you'll take. So for instance, this might be an actor, and maybe if you decide that it's all caps, it might be that you're a critic, okay, or maybe you're a fan, okay, or you are the director, okay, all right, or the script writer, blah blah blah, whatever, okay, and so only those values are valid. Then we created a model that provided us with the generic functions to be able to create, read, update, and delete users. We then created a DAO that wrapped the low-level models, right, inside a higher-level API, right, that was specific to our domain. Our domain is movies, right, and written in terms of this low-level API, Mongoose API. So we created users. We were able to retrieve all users, find a user if you give me the username, right? Or find by credentials if you pass me the username and password. We could find that one, right? And we took out the password. We don't want to. If we find a user, we do not want to pass the password outside of our server. So we clean that up. We created for delete users, we created update users, and we had just gotten started about being able to register for user. And the implementation we thought of was that you would first, you would pass us the username for the user. We would find if the user was already existed, and if the user already existed, we would fail this, right? Actually, what we did is we decided to write this instead of writing it down here in the DAO. We decided to put it a little bit higher in the controller, right? In the controller obviously has APIs for being able to create new users, to retrieve all the users, to delete a specific user, or to update a specific user, right? Something that might make sense to have here is also to retrieve an individual user, right? So then we had started implementing some. So anyway, we tested this; it works, right? We were able to create users. We created a couple of test cases in Postman, and these all work. We did some coding as well in the user interface as well. Let me open that up, see where we are there. So Node, React, I think it's this one. Okay, yeah. So for that, we created a couple of screens, right, that dealt with users. We created a thunk, right, a service that fetched all users, put the users in a reducer, and then we read those users from the reducer, and then we were able to render them, right? Just to illustrate real quick, if we start the server here, so this is Node app.js. There we are, and so we can run this npm start here. npm start. Okay, let's see. All right, yeah. So we've got our users, right? Goes and fetches those users, Alice, Bob, Charlie. And I think that's all we did, right? Just being able to read the users. We then started talking about implementing register, but I don't believe we got started, right? So I think this is where we left off. Okay, so let's continue from here, right? So let's see what register does. So register, here's register. If I click on register, the register screen, let's see, the register screen is right here. And this is where we had implemented this, right? We said we had a couple of states for username, password, and validate password. We also had an error message, right? So that when we clicked on the register button, right, it would check to see if the password matches, right? If they didn't, we set an error to password mismatch, which was displayed here as a red, right? So if we have some just bogus password and we click on register, right, it shows the error message. Okay, but instead, if the passwords don't match, do match, then we didn't do anything else, right? We didn't continue. We didn't continue. So that's what we're going to do today. When we click on the register, we're going to go out to the server. The server has a register endpoint, which is this one right here. So register, and what's it going to do? We're going to try and hit this endpoint, right? This register endpoint right here, /register. And what we're going to do is that we're going to retrieve the user information that contains the username. We're going to use the DAO. Actually, yeah, to find the user by username, which I believe is it's using the DAO. There it is, right? If it finds the username, if it exists, then we respond with the forward saying, no, sorry, that won't work and return. It's forbidden. Otherwise, we just create the user. Okay. We create and then we respond with the actual user. We didn't try it out. I don't believe we didn't try it out. Login works somewhat similar, right? We're going to receive the body. We didn't implement login, did we? Yeah, we never got to it. Right. So we'll do those two. So this is going to come back with, we're going to pass in presumably the body, which will contain the username and password. We're going to go out to the database and see if there's a user that matches the username and password. So if the user doesn't exist, then we're just going to send an error saying, oh, sorry, try again, different password, whatnot. Otherwise, we respond with the user without the password. And that's map to login. Okay, so let's try these two. Let's play around with these two. So let's first play around with register. Let's see. We need to do what? On the client, right? We need to click on the handle register and then call that register endpoint, right? So we need to do that on the service. We need the thunk. We need all that, right? So let's implement the service for register. So here's find. We never implemented the other ones. We only did find. Okay, find all users. Let's implement register. We're going to say export const register, async, and we're going to pass the user, which is going to contain the credentials, username, and password. That's the only two things that we need. And we're going to go out to the server, right? And we're going to go out to the get. We need this URL, right? So let's put this URL here as a base URL. Okay. So we say the register is going to go out and say base URL followed by register, right? Okay, and then that's going to come back with maybe what? I don't know, right? Register is going to come back either with a error message 4.3 or an actual user. So I'm just going to return the data. I'm not going to handle that here. Let's say data. Instead, right, I'm going to call this register from the user interface and get the error from there, right? See if that works. So let's see. We have a thunk. Let's create a thunk for this. So let's create a thunk. So this is export const register thunk. We created a sync thunk called register, and we're gonna do an async await. We're gonna pass the user here, which contains the credentials, and we're gonna call register here from the client and pass in the user. Right, so whatever comes back is going to end up in the reducer, right? So in the reducer, we're going to handle this. We're going to say the register thunk. If it's fulfilled, meaning everything went okay, no errors, we didn't get any errors. What we're going to get back is the user that we just registered, right? Okay. So we need to store that somewhere, right? So we'll call it the current user. So this will be the currently logged in user. So we'll put here current user. Right now is null by default. So once you register, you would be the current user. Right. So this would be the action.payload. And we're not handling the error yet. Okay. We could handle the error elsewhere using register thunk dot. Let's see what we have. We have rejected. Right. So probably that's the one. Right. So we can do rejected. Something went wrong, and we could put that maybe an error message here, error. Okay, and then this would be state action, and We can say state dot error is in the payload too, whatever came back, payload. Oh, error. No, I think it's payload. Payload. Okay. All right, excellent. So yeah, so let's try it out. Let's try and register and see what's going on. In the register screen, we're going to call this. We're going to call this handle. And if everything goes okay, right, we're going to dispatch that thunk to register, right? So we'll need to dispatch, so const dispatch, use dispatch, and if everything went okay, right, we're going to set error. If there's an error, right, we're just going to return. Otherwise, there's no else. No else. And here we can call that thunk to actually register. So register thunk. And we're going to pass the user information, which has a username and password. Right. So we're going to pass in the username and password. Okay, that's the user object, right, that contains username and password. Right. So username. This is the same thing. This is the same thing as what? If I say const new user, it's an object of username colon username, right, and password colon password, right, and then pass in here a user, new user, right, same thing. Oops. Okay. Now because these match, we can just use that instead. This notation, right? That's why I said it's the same thing. There we go. All right, and pass in the user. New user will be passed into the thunk. The new user is going to pass to register service. Oh, no, register, no, this is user service. Oh, it's here, this is wrong, sorry. It's from here, register, there we go. And so register comes in here, it passes the register. Oh, passes the new user as part of the object. So it's going to encode that as part of the object and get back the results, and it's going to go all the way to the thunk, okay? All right, so let's see if this works. Let's see if this blows up. Yeah, so let's see. Let's try and register. So users, we have Alice, Bob, and Charlie. So let's try and register as Dan. So maybe Dan 123, Dan 123. Register. I'm not sure if this is going to work. This might have given some error. Let's go to user and refresh. Okay, that didn't seem to work. Okay, so let's go back and try register as Dan again. This time, let's look for some error messages. Let's inspect. And let's put this over here. And let's not do that. And let's look at the networks, see what happens. So this is Dan. Dan 123, Dan 123. Let's register. Register 404. Okay, so it doesn't seem to. Let's look at the header. HTTP localhost. Oh, get. Not supposed to be a get. It's supposed to be a post. So let's fix that. So so register should be a post first of all, right? Okay, good. Also, so that I don't have to type this again, I'm just going to put here Dan, and Dan 123, and we're just testing it, right? So Dan. All right. Okay, let's try this again. Let's clear this out. Let's try register. Okay, so this time around we didn't get an error, right? The error was okay. It went out. There's a payload. There's what we sent. Let's see what came back. All right, so it looks promising. We do get back an object that has an ID. So presumably this was added to the database. Let's go to users. Notice that indeed Dan was indeed added, right? Now, if I try to register with the same Dan, right? Notice that register comes back with a forbidden, which is exactly what we wanted, right? With 403, perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna leave the handling of the error for you. Okay, but let's work on being able to log in. Right, if we created Dan, right, we should be able to log in as Dan. Right, so let's do that. And so yeah, so let's go back to Node. Let's see what we did for logins. For login, we want to be able to find the user. If the user doesn't exist, let's come back with 403. If the user does exist, it's going to come back with the user. Perfect. Okay. So let's do that. Let's do login. So login is here. We don't have a user interface for that, so let's create it. It's going to look very, very similar to register. So I'm just going to copy register and call it login. So here's login. Let's change it a little bit. So instead of register, it's going to be called login. It's going to have username, it's going to have password. It's not going to have validate. So handle register button. So this will be handle the login button, right? So this will be handle login button. We don't have this error message here, right? So we're not checking to see if the passwords are the same. So we're going to remove that. You might do all the validation, right? So here's the new user. So this would be really the login user, right? So I'm going to refactor that and call it, login user. And we're going to pass in user and password. The thunk is going to be the login thunk, right? So we'll do that in a minute. So this is login. We don't have an error, but we handle it there. We have set username, set password. We don't have a validated password, so I'm going to remove that. And I'm using the handle login, so this will be login, and this will be login. Okay. All right. For the thunks and the service, we need to write that too, right? So let's head over to the service. Service is going to look very, very similar to register, so I'm just going to copy it. And so this is login. And this is going to go out response, post, blah, 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 blah. This is login. Very good. And then I can write thunk. So now the thunk, the login thunk is going to look very similar to the register thunk. So it's going to be login thunk. And this is login. This is login that we bring from service. So login. There we go. Okay. Then in the reducer, again, very similar to the register, we're going to have a login fulfilled. So login, this is login thunk fulfilled. And if we are successful, then the current user who's currently logged in is the current user. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. So let's try it out. Let's try it out. Now, login. I still need to display login here. So in the navigation, let's go to navigation. Navigation. All right. So I do have login. I need to be able to display the login when this says login up here. So that probably is in navigation. In app.js, probably I need to create a route for it. All right. So if I have a login route, then I want to display the login component. There it is, right? So in the register, we have the register component and login here. Okay, excellent. So let's try it out. So let's cool this out, right? If the user does not exist, and I log in, I get, interesting. So I get a fine. That doesn't look right. Login. Wait a minute. Login. Oh, it's using the register thunk. That's wrong, right? It's supposed to, so login button needs to be able to call the login thunk. There we go. Let's try that out. Let's try that again. Let's clear that out. Let me log in as that person. I still get log in, and this is, it goes to log in. It comes back with a post. Okay. If the user doesn't, oh, probably because I just created that user. Let's try it again, something weird. There we go. Notice I got a 4-3 saying that that user doesn't exist. I can't log in as that user. But I should be able to log in as one of the users, which I have created, this Dan, something weird. So let's log in as Bob, right? So let's go to login. I believe the Bob's login was Bob, and then Bob was 3. So this user does exist, and it comes back with that user. Okay. Right. Now notice that we're storing the current user in the browser, right? In the browser, we're storing the data of the current user and the reducer. We're saying, okay, whether you register or whether you log in, so register or log in. If you are successful registering or logging in, I'm going to store the current user in a local state. Yes. That means that I should be able to display this current user either after logging in or after having registered. So if I go to login, for instance, I could say, down here, I could say something like, if there is a, we can extract that from the, from the reducer, right? We can say, const current user from that reducer, use selector. Now that reducer, I believe we called it, let's see, what do we call it? Yeah, the user reducer puts it all in users, right? So this is state, and it's grabbing it from user, current user. If there's a current user, right, then I want to display h2 current user dot username, right, or something like welcome, right? Okay, same thing if I register, right? Same thing if I register. Once I have registered, presumably I know who I am, right? So I should be able to display here and extract the current user from the selector. I would say, same thing that we did for the login. So let me copy that. I'm going to extract from the reducer the current user, right? If there is one, which initially is null, right? Notice that the reducer, notice that the current user is set to null at first, right? And it's only not null if we successfully come back having logged in or registered. Okay. All right, let's see. What am I missing here? Assignment, blah, 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 blah. Protocol, install an expression. User is not defined. In login, line 9. Let's see, let's go login. User, oh, okay, sorry, this is state dot user. Sorry. There we go, like that. And same thing, I guess, for our register. So register had a typo. Like that. Okay. So let's try to render login. Ooh, what's going on? Console. Blah 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 blah. Cannot just destruct current user of login. Use selector current user yada yada yada. No. Let's see. What does the reducer say? Reducer is current user, initial state, current user, and login fulfilled. state current, yada, yada, yada. Customize, what's going on? You select it as it is. Uncaught cannot destruct property current user of blah, 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 as it is undefined. Oh, it's undefined. Undefined. That's not current user of users. Initial state. State current user. Oh, maybe, okay, current. Well, no, I mean, it is no. It is no. User payload. Login fun, and it returns whatever login returns, and login returns the response to that data. Yeah. Network. And login. Tell user, login now. Login, even register? Register. Same thing, huh? Cannot destruct current user. Interesting. Service register. What's going on here? Current user, yada, 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 yada. State user. Oh, it is called user, right? Oh, users. Users. So users. And how about login? Did I do the same thing in login? So this is users. There we go. Okay. Right. So if I log in as Dan, I log in. It says welcome Dan, right? Instead, if I log in someone who doesn't exist, right? It should be null, and I should clear that out. I should clear that out, and probably I need to do that in the reducer. So in the reducer, if it's not fulfilled, right, I should say rejected state dot current user equals null, right? And should probably do the same thing for login. So in the login thunk, right? If it's rejected, current user equals null, right? So if I log in as someone who exists, it comes back with Dan. If it's something doesn't exist, right? It comes back with null, right? We get the forbidden as we should. Same thing with register, right? If I register as A, B, C, D, E as ed 1, 2, 3, ed 1, 2, 3, and I register, right? It works. Now, if I register as someone who already exists, right, comes back as forbidden. You can't register as that person, and it goes away, right? Now, if I log in as ed 1, 2, 3, right, that person exists. Now, the interesting thing would be that this should be remembered across multiple screens, right? If I go to profile, it'd be nice that I would be able to display here that person who's logged in. If I go anywhere, right? If I go to home or profile, it should be able to remember that that person Ed is currently logged in, right? So if I go to the profile screen, so let's create a profile screen. So let's create a profile. So new profile. So this is profile. And so we have a const profile. I should be able to extract the same current user from the same reducer, right? So selector, state, and extract state.users from that bucket, from that slice, and then return the profile, right? So this would be the profile screen, and display here H2 welcome, right? If the current user exists. Now, obviously that depending on what you're logged in, if it's mine or somebody else's, which we don't know how to do that yet, right? Right now, this is the profile for the current user who's logged in, right? So presumably I shouldn't even be able to navigate here if I'm not logged in. So we'll see that in a minute how we do that. But here we can say username, right? And here we're going to export default profile. So here in the profile, if I navigate to the profile, it should be able to say, oh, we need a route. We need a route for that. Right? So let's head over to app and create a route for the profile that we just created. And so if we are in the profile, then this would display the profile. Let's see, profile, error, blah, 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 blah. Boundary, yada, 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 property of username. Let's see, login. Did I log in? Let's log in. Now let's go to profile. There we go. See that? It remembers. Same thing if I go to home, right? If I go to home, the home screen. Where's home? Movies. Home is here. Oh, movies. Yes. So if I go to movies, I should, if the current user is logged in, right, I can retrieve that and say current user, extract that from use selector state users. And if the user is logged in, right, we say if there's a current user, then we say H2, welcome current user dot username. Okay. So in the home, we say welcome Dan. Just like in the profile, we say welcome Dan. Just log in. Okay. But if I try to log in as something that wait, that user exists? Login. Okay, that doesn't exist, right? That user. So I'm not logged in. If I go to home, notice that it does not. Now it's null. Current user is null, right? So it doesn't greet me. Now profile is not smart. My profile crashes, right? Because I didn't check to see it was null, and I'm just retrieving the username of something that is null. So I should be smart about that, right? And the profile also just make sure, right, that the only if the current user exists, then do the greeting. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So log in Dan, and I go to profile. There's Dan. Okay. But there is a flaw. There's a huge flaw, right? If I refresh the screen, notice that there is no profile. It's gone. Right. If I go to home, even if I successfully log in, right, and I go to profile, home, blah, 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 right? What happens if I refresh? If I refresh, it's gone, right? There's no way for the client, right, to survive a refresh, right? Because here in the reducer, basically we are storing the information in the state in the browser. And we know that if we refresh the browser, all that information is gone, right? We reset to where we were when we first loaded. Right? The only place where that is permanently stored, right, is on the server, and even more permanent in the database. Okay, so somehow we need to remember that there is somebody logged in, right, and that their identity is whoever just logged in, right? So instead of storing this, or instead of just storing it here on the client, really you need to store it on the server, right? So let's head back to the server. And so there's a couple ways of doing it. We'll do it the stupid way. Not stupid, but the naive way first, right? And then we'll introduce a more correct way or the right way later. But it's a little harder to understand the right way, so I'm going to explain it the easy way first because it's much easier to understand. So here's login. Here's login. Here's register. We need to be able to remember, right, that this person's logged in. So we're going to store it and remember it here on the server. So we're going to keep track of a variable. Okay, and we're going to say we're going to have here a global variable. We're going to say let current user know. Okay. And then here, when we register and we know that you have successfully registered, we are going to, after we create the user, we're going to store the current user. Let's say actual user. See that? And same thing, if you successfully log in, we're going to remember that the current user is the person who we just found successfully as the existing user that is already stored in the database. Okay. But then we need to find a way to ask the server from the client. You know, if we refresh the screen, right, we need to be able to ask somebody, hey, do I know who's currently logged in or not? I don't know, right? What's my initial state on whether we know that somebody's logged in or not? And the only place to ask is the server, right? Because somebody has just refreshed us, and only the server knows whether somebody logged in or not. So in that sense, we are going to create another endpoint. We're going to call it profile. Right, profile is going to contain, it's going to retrieve the current profile, which basically it's the basically it's going to retrieve who's currently logged in. Request response, right? And we're going to say, you know, if current user, right? If there's a current user, then I'm going to respond with the current user. So we're going to send JSON current user. Okay, and then return. Otherwise, we're going to respond with a say, nope, nobody's logged in. So we're going to send a 403. It's not, you're not allowed here. Okay, nobody's logged in. And logout, basically, right? Basically, logout is going to be logout. Basically, it's going to be just clearing out, right? Clearing out that current user and say current user equals null. Nobody's logged in, right? We're going to respond. Oh, we're just going to respond successfully. Yep, you've been logged in. So log out, right? It's just going to clear out who's currently logged in here. So log out. All right. Okay. All right. So let's restart this. All right. Okay. So what do we need to do is that here in the profile, right? Or whenever we come in here, the first thing we need to check to see is, are we logged in? Is that the first thing? So here's the end. Here's the root, right, of the application, right? And this is the first thing that we see, and this is a perfect place to go check to see if anybody's logged in, right? Because we would like to say hello if indeed somebody's logged in. Okay, so let's do that. So in the home, or even if I try to navigate to profile, I like to greet them, right? Also, if I know that they're logged in, if I know that they're logged in, there's no point in showing them the login in the register screen. But if I know they are not logged in, and I don't know who they are, then yes, it would make sense to give them the register in the login screen. So let's do that. So let's go to the home, and let's in home, which I believe is I think it's this one, right? Movies here, right? This is a perfect place where we can go fetch and check to see if there's somebody logged in. Okay, so let's do that. Let's in the user service, right? We need a we need to go fetch the profile. So we say export const profile is saying we're going to go out and hit that endpoint we just created. Const response, await, axios, blah blah blah. Same thing always, right? So I'm just going to copy this. But I'm going to hit profile. Okay. And profile is going to come back with either an error or a user, an actual user, right? So let's create a thunk to this. And it's going to be a profile thunk. So profile. We're not passing any data. Okay, and this is profile from here. So profile. And then in the reducer, we're going to handle that either success or fail. I'm just going to copy the login thunk. So this will be the profile thunk. So profile thunk, right? So if it's successful, the current user is in the payload. Perfect. If instead it's rejected with a 4 or 3 or whatever, right, we get an error and the current user is not perfect. So we're just checking to see, is anybody logged in? All right. And we're going to do that as the very first thing right here, right? We're going to not only want to find all movies, but we're also going to dispatch. We're also going to dispatch the profile. So dispatch profile thunk, go fetch to see if anybody's logged in. If anybody's logged in, we're going to come in here and we're going to populate this current user and we can say greetings. You see that? Right? So let's try it out. Profile thunk is not defined, blah, blah, blah. Users reducer. Users reducer. Oh yeah, we never declared it here. So it's profile reducer. There we go. Okay, so let's go to home. Nobody's logged in. Okay, let me log in. So I'm going to log in as Dan. Log in. Perfect. Let me go to home. Okay, I'm logged in. Remember before we refreshed, this didn't work. Let's see if this works. I'm going to refresh. Notice that now it remembers that we're logged in. See that? If I go to the profile and I refresh, it's not, right? Because it's only doing it in the home, right? It's only doing it in the home. Okay. So profile only remembers, right, if I first went home, but not if I went to profile. So that's a problem, right? Because now we would need to do it every time we want to know, right, that in the screen, are we logged in? Should we display the correct thing or not? Blah blah blah, right? So that's kind of pain, right? So what we're gonna do is that instead, in the client, this check that we did here in the home. We're in the wrong. This check that we did here in the movies, ideally, even before coming to the movies, right, before anything displays, we would like to know whether that person exists or not, or are we logged in or not. So ideally what we're going to do is say, well, even before we get to the movies, I like to know if somebody's logged in. Sorry. So we would like to create an outer content, right? An outer component that checks to see if we are logged in or not, right? So call it maybe check profile or something that populates, makes that check before we hit anything here, right? Basically what movies doing, but movies, notice that it's not being hit. And, if we go to profile, instead of repeating it everywhere, what we could do is just wrap all the components around, right? So that it always checks before hitting all the other ones, right? So let's do that. Let's we could create here a component here called profile check or current user check, right? Component or current user, right? So const current user, And in here, right, we can do the thunk, right? What we did in the movie. So instead of doing it here and then having to repeat it everywhere, we could do it here. So we'll do use effect, right? We only need to dispatch the profile. We don't need this. The profile thunk. Okay. And so it's going to load that. It's going to load that, and this is going to populate all the other ones, correct? The problem is that we really want this to be done. Let's add it right here. We're going to do. We don't even want to render anything, right? We don't even want to render anything. We just want it to run, right, and display all the other ones. Now the thing is that we wanted to contain all these, right? So it's like kind of in the same context, right? So that if any one of them load, right, it's within the context of all these, right? So somehow we want this to be in the body of this new component, which we haven't done, right? We haven't done components that contain other components, right? So let's do that, right? So let's create this current components, right? And I need to export it. So export default current user. So it's current user, right? But this whole thing here is its body, right? So they're all contained in the body. So we haven't done that. So how do I do that? If I go here, notice that it's not going to render anything. Current users. It's not exported. Current user export. Yeah, it is exported. Profile. Compile problems. Line 5. Use effect. Delete React. Oh no, React from React. Okay, we don't have a return. So what we're going to do is the following, right? We need to have a return. We need to have what? So what do we return here? What do we return here? Right? Do we return null? Notice that if I return null, cannot React, huh? Webpack React types React. No, use. Oh wait, no, this is wrong. Sorry, this goes here. There we go. Dispatch. Okay, we need to include that. So let's include that. Import. Dispatch. That's from React Redux. Create. Huh? Import. Oh, I need to create it. I need to create dispatch. So const dispatch. Use dispatch. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So notice that it's returning null. Cannot find React Redux context. Please ensure the component is wrapped in a provider. Oh, okay. So that too, right? So all because we're using all these use selector, these needs to be in the provider. So let me put that in here. This needs to be in the provider. And now it's not rendering anything. Why? Because current user is rendering as null, right? So anything that this returns, right? Current user is rendering current user. See that? We can even say that it's going to go check the profile, and if there is a current user, we can extract it here. We can say const current user from use selector of the state. We can return the state users, And if there is a current user, right, we can render the current user. Okay, and I guess this should be like that. And this might be H1, something like that. All right, so there's Dan. Now, notice how to remember that Dan was logged in. That's because way back when we logged in, right, the server remembered, right, that that Dan is logged in, right? But notice that what happens to the rest of the page? What happens to the rest of the screen, right? Really, we want to be able to render all the stuff, movies, blah blah blah, and they want to be able to know that somebody is logged in, right? So how do we do that? So all these are children, right? All these here, right, are children to the current component, right? They are all nested. So it turns out that there's a special component, right? That if a component contains other components, all these extra components, the children are all passed in to the parents, right, as a special property, right, in the arguments here. So children are passed right there. Yeah. So all these guys, right, all these guys, well, actually there's only one, this guy, is passed in right here. So we could basically, what we can do here is that instead of returning this, we can return the children. Right, there we go. See that? It's returning the children with the fact that somebody is logged in, right? And if I go to home, welcome Dan, log in, I'm already logged in, right? And I can now make rules here that because I'm logged in, I should not display register and login here in the navigation. Right? I could go to my navigator. I could go to my navigation here. Where's navigation? No, that's not it. Navigation here, navigation. Right, I can retrieve the current user. I can say, grab me the current user from that state. You know, use selector from the state, and I could say, well, grab me the current user. And so now I can make logic, right? I can say screens search. Let's see. How do we do it? You can say, if current user let's see, wait a minute. We can remove these, right? I can say if there is a current user, then screens push profile if somebody's logged in. So I want profile to be an option. Otherwise, right, if there is no current user, then I would like to add and push login, and I want to push register. Okay. Right. So let's see. Oops. What did I do? Wait a minute. Select navigation generate current user cannot destruct property current user. Did I misspell it? Oops. Oh no, user. Sorry, users. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So see, I am logged in. So notice that there is no login or register. Right? I can go to profile. Okay. So for instance, if I log out, right? If I log out, so for instance, in the profile screen, I can have a profile. If I can have a logout button at the bottom here, see, like a button logout in the profile. That oh wait, no. Here. And logout sends a logout request, through the service. So here's our service, and I'd like to be able to send a logout here, logout out to the controller. And probably I just don't want to do anything particular in the logout, or maybe I want to navigate to the home screen, right, or something like that. So I'll probably need to have a thunk for that, right? So we'll add a logout thunk. So for a logout thunk, logout, using logout, and we don't have a user to log out, and this is from logout. Log out, and in the reducer, if it's successful, we call logout. So there's a logout thunk, logout thunk. Oh, thunk. Oops. There we go. Fulfilled. I logged out. This is null now. Logout thunk. Blah blah blah. So in the profile, I'm going to dispatch, right? If I click on logout, I'm going to dispatch, const dispatch, use dispatch, and I'm going to handle the logout. So I'll handle logout. I'm going to dispatch the logout thunk. If I click on logout, and oops. This is button danger. Put it maybe red. And if we click on this, we're going to call the handle logout, right? And so let's see, logout thunk. Oops, we didn't define it. Logout thunk. Yeah. In the reducers, let's go into reducer. Logout thunk. I already declared it, so I guess it goes down here like that. So if I go to home, notice I'm still logged in, right? So profile, home, I have that, right? And now if I go to profile and I do a logout, notice that Dan goes away. Notice that login and register come back. Home, I'm not logged in anymore, right? So even if I refresh, it's gone, right? Nowhere does it show that Dan is logged in. Home, I'm refreshing. If I go log in and log in back as Dan, welcome Dan. Notice that login and register go away. Profile knows that I'm logged in. Even if I refresh the screen, right? It's going out to the server, retrieving all that, and coming back to home, right? Everywhere it knows that I'm logged in, right? If I go to profile, I can log out and log in, and notice that profile screen goes away. The profile button goes away. Notice that it keeps me in the profile screen. So we would want to be able to kick you out of the profile screen because you shouldn't be here, right? You shouldn't be able to come to the profile screen if you're logged in, right? Or at least we would hide the the private stuff, right? We would only show you the public thing. So notice I'm logged out. So anyway, this sort of works, right? It is being remembered. All this is being remembered by the server in this one current user variable. But what happens if you want multiple users? What if you want Dan and Alice and Bob and Charlie, or hundreds or thousands of people being logged in at the same time? One variable would not be enough, right? Notice that it would be the same server being used by thousands of users, and somehow the server would have to maintain a separate variable here, right? One for Alice, one for Bob, and the server would need to be able to distinguish, right? If Alice is logged in and Bob is logged in, I need to maintain information exclusive to them, right? So that's where we're going to be discussing that on Wednesday. How do you distinguish between the multiple people that are registered? How do you keep data separated from multiple users? Okay. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna leave it here. Hopefully this was useful. I will push this to the repository so you can take a look at it, play around with it. So Wednesday we'll look at cookies, sessions, timeouts, and things like that. All right. So Wednesday we do have that. Well, I'm gonna have a session. You're welcome to come. If you don't want to come, that's fine. I'm gonna record a session anyway, and we'll make it available, as a recording again on YouTube, and it'll be available on the regular Canvas. Okay. No quiz last week. There will be a quiz when we come back after Thanksgiving. Office hours tomorrow are at 8 in the morning. All right, everyone. Thank you. Good night.